Alright, so let's talk about the basic structure of a Java program. Because to a new programmer, to somebody who's new to programming in general, this is going to be really strange. Like, why are we typing this? You know, what's going on? So the basic structure will be something like this. The question is, why do we write all this? What is this? What is this garbage? Like in Python, for example, we could just write print hello world without even a semicolon, and we'd be good. We'd be fine. But here we have to do all this nonsense to do, and then we have to do system.out.println hello world. So what's with that? Why is this the way it is? To a certain extent, I'm not completely sure, but I have a good idea about this bit right here. So this is what's called an entry point for a program. Other languages that are like C and C++, and loads of other languages. Theoretically, this is the entry point from which the compiler says, oh, so this is where we should start executing stuff. So then what do these keywords mean? And that gets a little bit into more object-oriented stuff that's really should be reserved for later on that we learn about this, but I'm going to go over it anyways just to basically give a really brief overview. So first things first, public class hello. So for Java files, there has to be one public class file who that basically acts as like where the program is. This is just saying, hey, the program is in this public class right here. You can only have one public class in a Java file. Now, what is a public class? So, in object-oriented programming, a class is just kind of like a blueprint for something. Think of it like this, you know. The class for a chair would be sort of like the blueprints for a chair, right? So that's all other classes. Now, what is this public? Why is it public? What does that even mean? Public is basically just saying that something outside of it, something outside of this class can access it. So if I was to write, so I don't know, like, can I do that? Private class test. I could actually instance hello. Okay, let's see, what's it complaining about? Legal modifier class says only public abstraction final. Yeah, okay, so I can't even do that here. But public is just saying I can be accessed by something outside of myself. Something that's public, it's like, you know, like let's go back to the blueprint analogy for the blueprints for like a chair. So, and it might be a terrible analogy for now, but this is just to get kind of a point across. So all public is saying is that, hey, if you want to use this blueprint, you can. And then the name hello, usually, I think always has to actually, but usually matches the file name .java. So whatever the file name is, followed by .java. So it's just like, this is hello with capital H. The file name is capital H with a hello capital H .java. So that's what this means basically. It's just saying, hey, here's this blueprint, here's this program basically that I have, and things outside of it can actually access it. Now, I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly how Java deals with it, but this is just, you know, with the small amount of knowledge I have. Now, what about this? What is this garbage? Why do we have to write so much just for one line? Why do we have to do system.out.println? What is this? Why are there semicolons everywhere? Why are there braces everywhere? I'll get into that in a second. But, so, public static void main string args. So, public, as we already know, just basically means, hey, you can access this. You can use this. Anything outside of me can access this. You know, anything outside of this structure I'm in, this blueprint. Because right now, so both classes and functions. Both classes and functions can be public, right? So you can have a private function too. So while a class is a blueprint, a function does something. It's basically just like a set of statements and variables, but we'll get into that later. So this is a function, right? This is the function name, main. So this function name right here is what Java will basically call eventually. But here's the thing: Java's entry point will always be main. You can't create your own function called main, I don't think, in Java. A similar thing is the way it is in C and C++. So, what's this before it? Why is this void? Void is what's called the return type of a function. So, if we're not going to return anything from a function, and main, this whole entire thing right here, is a function. If we're not going to return anything, we just say void, which says nothing there. So it's public. It can be this main function can be accessible by something outside of itself, and it's inside of this blueprint, this class that's accessible by something outside of itself. So that's basically what Java does. It says, okay, let's look in this class, and we're going to look at this main function. That's the entry point. Now, what does static mean? Static is kind of difficult to explain at this level, honestly, because I'm already like doing gross overgeneralizations, but I'm going to try anyways. Static is basically just saying there will be one instance of this thing when a program runs, right? So when you run your program, static is saying there should be only one of these public main functions that return void, that return nothing. Now, what about the string args thing? Really, the string args means arguments. So if we want to pass any arguments while we're using this program, we can. But this is all really just minutia, because all you really need to understand is that, you know, right now when you're just new to learning programming and you're learning Java, honestly, I think it might have been a better idea to start learning stuff in Python before this. But hey, whatever you do, you. You just want to know that you'll have this public class right here, followed by the name of the file name without the file extension. So this public class, and these braces that basically say here is where the program is, sort of. There'll be exceptions to that later on, but I digress. Now, and you also need to know that the entry point for a Java program is public static void main, and then these two parentheses, string, with these two things right here, args, and then just this. Very simple. That's all you need to know right now, is that is like, that's basically just what you're going to be doing a lot of in a class about Java, an introductory class about Java. Now, in the function, we also have these little braces right here that basically just denote, hey, here's where this function body is. So, what about this? What's this all about? Again, I'm going to explain it in the best sort of like elementary terms I can. So, why can't we just do something like this? Because in Java, using input and output is sort of, you basically use, it's very object oriented, so you use what's called an object, and objects use this thing called dot notation. So when you're saying system.out, you're basically saying, so this system, this is a class, or even perhaps an instance of a class. An instance of a class is basically like this. So if a class is the blueprints to a chair, then the actual chair is an instance of that class. So we have the system right here, and then we use dot out. So what does dot mean? Dot is just basically saying I'm going to access something inside of this class, inside of this instance. So system.out basically just means inside of the system, get me this out object, or this out thing, whatever this out is. And out is basically just specifying we want to output something. So we're asking this system object, or class right here, to get us this out object. And this out object, inside of it has the print line function. It's also called a method, because it's a member of this object out. And then finally, we can call the print method, and then insert our text, and then terminate the statement. Now, here's a question. What are we doing right here? Why are we using these parentheses? Because what's actually happening is because we're calling a function, just like main. Main right here, this is a function. We don't want to try to call this, per se, but you'll notice that it has arguments. Now, when we, or really, these are parameters, but when you pass them in, it's just minutia. But, so, we have println. So when we call this function, we're sending it this data, this string literal right here. Hello world. And what that does is it basically says, hey, system.out.println, otherwise known as the print line function inside of the out object inside of the system class. Take in this data and do something with it. That's all we're saying. And then this semicolon right here is to denote that we're ending a statement. Now, statements in Java, part of Java is just learning when and when not to use correct punctuation and stuff like that. That's all of programming, though. Like, I'm not really the best at Java. I'm not. I don't know a whole lot about Java, but I know enough about general programming in languages like C and C++ and Python to explain this to somebody who's new. So basically, let's imagine we're the compiler for a second. We're going to basically go through this program. We're going to say, all right, what's going on? So we start out at this line. We say public class hello. Okay, so this has the same name as the file name. So we want to go inside this because this is where we're going to find our entry point. And then we search. We say, let's say we add a couple lines here. Okay, entry point's not at line 3. It's not at line 4. Oh, at line 5 we have something. Okay, let's read it. So it's a main function. Okay, it's void. Okay, public static void main. And what's the, okay, a string args. So this is our entry point. So now we're like, okay, inside this, let's start executing something. So then we look at the code. We say, okay, so it's asking for the system class. Okay, and inside the system, it's looking for the out class so that it can do some outputting. Okay, and then inside the out class, or inside the out object, it wants to get to the printline function. Okay, and what does it want to send to that printline function? And we see it's hello world. And from there, it terminates the, okay, so then we check. Is it done with that? Are there more statements to be evaluated, or is that it? Is that just the end of that statement right there? Is there more code here? No, there's not. Okay, so let's go to the next line. Okay, the next line is the closing brace, so we can just basically step outside of this main function. We're not worried about it anymore. Let's add more lines here. And so then we say, okay, so let's go down. Nothing here, nothing here, nothing here. Oh, this is the closing brace for the class, the public class for this file. Okay, well that's the end of the program then. So we're done here. And you'll see, if you do some debugging, I would suppose, I'm not sure exactly, I'm not very familiar with debugging in VS Code, although I know kind of how to do it, but you'll see that when we do Control F5, when we run it either with debugging or without, I like to run without debugging usually, we say Control F5, and we see it runs. Hello world. There you go. So we run it, and boom, there it is. So in a way, that's kind of what Java's doing, and I hope this gives you a brief overview on why we write the things we do. Because from a beginner's perspective, this looks like complete garbage. Like, why wouldn't we do something, easier? Why does it have to be all this stuff? It's so strange. And it is kind of weird to start out with, but in time, especially after you get into object-oriented programming, you'll begin to understand why these things are the way they are, and all that other stuff, all that other stuff. So I hope you found this video useful.